Right, so from one set of Marxists in Bowles and Gintis on to another with Paul Willis, very famous sociologist. Okay, again, writing from the 1970s, so potentially quite old fashioned, but let's move on with it anyway. So, Marxist perspective, well worth noting, but he doesn't necessarily agree with other Marxists. Okay, this guy Paul Willis was somewhat of an interactionist as well as being a Marxist. So it's definitely something to consider when you're thinking about this theory or this study, I should say. So he does acknowledge the fact that there is conflict in society and within the education system. He does reject the view that there is a direct relationship between the economy and the education system. So he's basically rejecting Bowles and Gintis. Okay, he doesn't agree with them, despite them both being Marxists. He says that although Bowles and Gintis think that the education system is an agency of socialization. He doesn't think that it's a very good one, okay, and he doesn't really it doesn't really sort of account for the mistakes that can be made, because we all know that not everyone succeeds in education. Okay, that is a simple fact. Okay, and that's what Paul Willis is focusing on. It's those kids who don't quite get on with education, and what happens to them. Okay, what is their outcome? So he wrote a book, Learning to Labour, very famous book. For any of you keen beans out there, I would recommend it. Okay, it's a good book, very interesting. But basically, it's a very small study. Okay, he looked at a group of working class boys who within school formed this anti-school subculture. Okay, they were called the lads in his book. Okay, but his method. Okay, because this could come up in the exam. His method was observation and participant observation, obviously, recording group discussions, informal interviews, and diaries. Okay, so there's a few methods there, sort of mixed methods approach, but as long as you can name a couple of them, that should be fine. Okay, so let's move on to what he found. So he found obviously this counter-school subculture, anti-school subculture, and they directly opposed the values of the school. Okay, remember a school is a very middle-class place. Okay, and if you're working class within this middle-class setting, it's not really going to fit with your sort of way of living. Okay, so you're not necessarily going to like it. These members, okay, these lads of the counter school culture felt very much superior. Okay, they felt that they were right and everyone else was wrong, and that's what shaped their attitude towards their schoolwork. Okay, their main objective was to avoid lessons. Okay, they resented everything that the school did to try and manage their time, to try and keep them in education. They resented that, and basically they didn't really. They certainly weren't obedient, and they certainly weren't docile. Okay, so they didn't really sort of take it lying down, as it were. They weren't good students. Let's put it that way. Okay, but Willis basically, this is where the Marxist in Willis comes out. Okay, he concluded that their rejection of school made them suitable candidates for male-dominated, unskilled manual work. Okay, so basically exactly what the bourgeoisie want them for. Okay, so it's somewhat ironic that they are rejecting this thing that Bowles and Gintis said was going to make them into these mindless workers. Okay, the education system. So they rejected it, but they still ended up becoming these mindless, unskilled manual workers. Okay, again, well worth noting that this was done in the 1970s, so mindless sort of factory work was very much a thing to happen back then. Okay, so I have summarized here for you, so by all means, pause the video now if you want to have a quick look. And basically, I've summarized here as well that the idea that he was, yes, an interactionist. Okay, he looked at this very small section of society and drew this massive theory. And it's quite difficult to get your head around, okay? But it is in direct answer to Bowles and Gintis, okay? So these two theories do go together, although not necessarily in a good way. They are sort of disagreeing with one another, okay? So hopefully that makes sense, okay? It's quite a difficult one, but it's basically an empirical study about the effects of education on class situation.